that if you bring love to bear, this romantic bonding, this attachment to bear, then you've got pairs of people who stick to each other in ways that are good for the begetting and raising of children, and that maybe this bonding between parent and child got co-opted into being romantic love between potential mates. Another way of putting it would be to say, well, maybe romantic love exists because straight out, just regular old lust is not compatible with civilization. If people are just simply acting on their evolutionarily based desire to mate, it's hard to run a civilization. It's hard to run a university, for instance, because people are busy. So what you've got to do is, if you're going to run a civilization, you have to find some way to channel that sex drive into other activities so that the rest of civilization can keep going. Now, if you start talking in those terms, you're talking in terms that you will see are very much like what Freud said. Freud argued that that things like romantic love are necessary in order to have a civilization. In the absence if you're a spider, you don't need romantic love, but you're also not going to have, spider civilization is somewhat more limited. Now, how does Laura know that Mark loves her? Well, he said so, right? Well, that's cool. I can say so too, right? I love you. I might even sort of kind of mean it in this sort of generic, I love all of humanity kind of sense. But it's obviously different. Now, there are various other ways that he can be indicating the fact that he is in love with her. But she's got to figure this out. Is he really in love with me, or is he just kind of actually, he's got to figure it out too. Am I really in love with her? Her active perception, it would be perfectly possible for her to be wrong, right? She looks at him, she thinks, he's in love with me, and he's thinking, I'm not in love with her, I'm just faking. Right? Could be. Now, could it go the other way? Could he be thinking, I'm in love with her, and it not be true? Is that logically possible? Now, and who could tell you that it wasn't true? Your mother? You don't really love her. Well, you probably wouldn't buy that anymore, but you would have once. If you plot, let's see, how are we going to do this? All right, well, this is age. I know this axis is age. So if you plot the percentage of people who say, you ask kids, who knows your inner emotions the best? You, or you can give it an open-ended question, but the real categories are you or mom and dad. It turns out, so if this is you and this is mom and dad, that function crosses the 50% point at the surprisingly late age of early adolescence. Before that, the majority of kids will assert that mom and dad know their emotions better than they themselves know it. How could that be the case? Well, it's hard to get yourself back into that mental state at this point. It gets easier again once you have kids of your own, because you're looking at your kid, and you're like your 4-year-old kid, and your kid's doing, and you say, got to go to the bathroom? No, I've got to go to the bathroom. You got to go to the bathroom? No, I don't have to go to the bathroom. You sure you don't have to go to the bathroom? No, okay, I guess you don't have to go to the bathroom. Let's all get in the car. I got to go to the bathroom. And so if the kid is a little self-reflective, he thinks, hey, wait a minute. First of all, not only do I have to go to the bathroom, but, mom and dad, they knew that before I did. That's cool. That's also a little scary because I thought a whole bunch of other things. I wonder if they know those things too. Eventually, you figure out, no, I didn't know that stuff, which is just as well for all concerned. Returning to the love example, the point is that you need to know, you need to perform an act of perception to decide that somebody else loves you, and you need to do an act of sort of self-perception to decide that you love somebody else. You might also ask yourself at that point, well, what is it that you love? Physical attributes, that's considered sort of crass, and even worse would be to say, I love her for her money and possessions. Right? That sounds terrible, but if you ask yourself, what are you watching on TV, there's a continuous pairing of love, sex, and cars, soda, anything, right? Right? Well, I can't think of any particular ads at the moment because I don't watch enough TV. I'll ask my kids if there are any good sex and soda ads on at the moment, but there certainly have been. In any case, typically we say things like, I love her for her mind, or something like that. Now, you could love your laptop for its mind too. It doesn't seem to be quite the same thing. Now, all right, so there's the question of what it is that you might love. Where is that love if in you? Does that question make any sort of sense? Well, there's a traditional answer to that. If you asked where love lives, the sort of conventional out there in several hundred years ago probably would be simpler kind of answer would be heart. Well, yeah, liver's good too, but that's only if you're... The cool white virgin snows upon my heart have abated the ardor of my liver, says the prince guy in Shakespeare's Tempest. There's this notion that very much a folk psychological notion that emotions are resident in the viscera. And that makes a degree of sense because when you see the object of your heart's desire, you know it's your heart's desire because your heart goes thump, 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 right? Now, you think that if love is localized, if there is some chunk of you that is your love for whoever this significant other might be, where is that likely to be? Brain, somebody muttered up there. Yeah, it's probably in your brain. You can imagine why that was a hard notion to come by because, you look at the object of your desire and you don't suddenly say, my head! And you probably won't be sending brain-shaped chocolates to anybody at Valentine's Day either. But it is an interesting question to ask whether or not, all right, brain maybe. Is it localized enough that there's some little piece of brain that we could go to and say, Mark's love for Laura is there. And if we went in and pulled that board out of his computer, that he'd know who Laura was and he'd know everything else, but he just wouldn't be in love anymore. Is that level of localization plausible? Is the love normal? Is his love? Mark loves Laura for her mind. Is that normal? Suppose he loved her for her foot. Would that be normal? What's the difference? Why would one be? And if it wasn't normal, who gets to decide that it's normal? Do we, as a community, get to decide? Does the family get to decide? Is there some objective way to decide whether something is or is not normal? And if it's not normal, what do we get to do about it? Do we get to, if it's not normal, and would drugs fix it? Would surgery fix it? Would some sort of therapy fix it? You can see what's going on here. From a simple sort of statement like, Mark loves Laura, we can get to essentially any of the sort of topics that will show up in a course like this. Any you could have done, we wouldn't have had to use love as the particular example. Behind any of these things that we use perfectly comfortably in everyday life is a large set of very interesting questions, only a very few of which, of course, I can manage to address in an introductory level course. But the goal here would be to give you some sort of overview of the sorts of topics and the sorts of answers that modern academic psychology has come up with. The way that we do that is through lectures, through recitations, which are should not be treated as optional. We expect you to be there. They're not just like reviews for the exam, or there aren't problem sets in an introductory psych class the way there would be in chemistry or something. You're expected to be there. They're an integral part of the course. And there's the textbook. It's a good idea to look at it. I won't go into a lot more detail about the mechanics of the course. The syllabus will tell you most of what you want to know, and it's a really good idea to actually take a look at the syllabus and to take a look at the writing assignments because they have due dates attached to them and things like that. I will answer any blazingly mechanical questions about the course if they have occurred to anybody at the moment. Otherwise, I will plunge into the brain in a moment. After satisfying my thirst motivation yet more. Okay, let me say that the sort of ideological grounding of this course is that the course, like academic psychology generally, is materialist in its ideology. What does that mean? What that means is that the mind is what the brain does, and that if you have thoughts, if you have feelings, if you have memories, that these things arise out of the brain. This is not to say they are necessarily, that if we wanted to teach a straight neuroscience course, we just teach you about the brain. But it is to say that it is in distinction to another old philosophical position, which is dualism, which says that the mind is somehow an immaterial something that is separate from the brain. It interacts with you, it interacts with your body, but is separate. The reason for talking about the brain for this lecture and a chunk of the next lecture is this notion that the mind is what the brain does. And, well, if we want to find out what the brain does, let's see, we could make a little bit of a list here. You go up. Oh, we got to get rid of a little more of whatever that was. So, do I have a copy of the handout here somewhere? Yes, okay, so I can ask because it just has 4 broad classes of methods on the handout without describing them. How might we go about finding out what the brain does? Oh, this reminds me to say, anytime during the course of the term, if you got a question, comment, or whatever, feel free to raise your hand, and I will attempt to answer it. If I think we're being hopelessly diverted from where I think we need to get in the lecture, I may have to cut off discussion, but I'm more than happy to have the opportunity. So don't, just because it's a great big lecture, don't feel that you just got to sit there and not do anything interactive like raise your hand. Of course, if you raise your hand, you might end up exposing the details of your romantic engagements with the person sitting next to you, but that's a risk you'll have to take.